All right, now joining us on Tennis Channel Inside In, second time on the show, officially reaching that reoccurring guest status. Just completed his pro career last August at the Stanford Challenger, putting a bow end on a career that included the 2012 National Championship for the Stanford Cardinals. Well, Bradley Klahn joining us, had some matches to call today. Bradley, welcome back to the show. Been a while since we caught up.
Thanks a lot, Mitch. Always an honor to join you and be a repeat customer again.
Yeah, there's just quite a bit to get to, and I know you're fresh in the tennis sphere, calling all these matches on T2 in Abu Dhabi and the WTA, which we're going to get to. But you're officially on the other side of your playing career, and we kind of talked about it. You've been on shows. The end was near, but you hang it up at your last tournament. It was kind of poetic in a way at Stanford. But if you can talk me through that process, how you got to that point of, this is going to be the end, and how fitting it was that it was where you dominated the college game for so long.
Yeah, it was becoming increasingly clear that my body wasn't able to handle the rigors of the tour. I was struggling with some injuries at the beginning of 2023. Also had to be very honest with myself about how long I was going to continue. If I wanted to get myself back into the top 100, understanding what that process was like, and understanding what life was like on the other side of playing professional tennis. When I was in it, it's all encompassing. I am so fortunate to have had an 11-year career, but I realized that it was time. It over the last 3 years since my most recent back surgery, I think it had been a thought in my head of trying to figure out when is the right time. How do I want to do it? How do I want to enjoy the last couple of years on tour? And I think that I really was able to do that towards the end of my career. I missed the clay court season with another injury, but I was able to finish off in the summer. And it was no secret, I always played my best tennis on the hard courts, particularly in the summer. I feel fortunate I was able to play a couple of my favorite events in Atlanta and DC. And then I think DC was really a fun moment for me, just to qualify, win a few matches, recapture some of those positive emotions that really made me fall in love with just the game of tennis, but also the pro ranks. And to be able to then finish off my career at Stanford, which is really a second home for me. It was the first time tournament. It just popped up. I was really struggling towards the end of my career, was hoping to play the US Open, and physically after DC just knew that the time was near. And I remember thinking through that Sunday. I think I played on a Monday at Stanford, Saturday, Sunday. It just, I hadn't really made the decision that it was going to be there in New York, and it just felt right. And at Stanford, I just kind of had this wave of emotion and relief of understanding that this was going to be it. I didn't want to torture my body anymore, and really enjoy that last event on court one. Had some family, girlfriend, a lot of people in the Stanford area that had supported me throughout my college career and all the way through the pros. And it was time.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, you put a lot of thought into the decision, but also organically it came to be, and in the schedule lined up to where Stanford was in August. It was on the hard courts, as you said, was processing that final match, which also was against a Stanford guy too, in Tristan Boyer. So there's a little poetry in that. But did it take time to process, maybe not the decision, but that final match? And then, okay, you wake up the next day and thinking about it as, I'm not an active pro tennis player anymore.
Yeah, it was weird. It was really weird. I think at the moment there was a little bit of a sigh of relief when I woke up Tuesday morning. I finished the match, went out and grabbed a couple beers with Brandon Coop, my assistant coach at Stanford, and my girlfriend Lexi, and just reminisce on my career, both on tour, but also at Stanford. Palo Alto has a lot of special memories for me on the tennis side, socially, Educationally, it's a place where I've always felt at home. And every time I step foot on campus, I leave with a positive feeling and just energized. So to wake up Tuesday morning and realize that I didn't have to get in the gym and spend an hour and a half trying to loosen up my body and go through the daily ritual that was to prepare me just to practice and play. There was a sigh of relief for sure. There's definitely some sadness of knowing that I won't compete in that way again. I think that's a notion that I've learned as I've transitioned out of pro tennis into other endeavors, which we can get into later, that there's always ways to flex that competitive muscle, but it's different. And tennis has been such a big part of my life. Competing on the tennis court has been such a big part of my life that it takes time to process and look back on all the good and bad memories. I think that's really what makes it special. It's those peaks and valleys, and those peaks don't happen without the valleys in between.
Right. It's a very good nuanced perspective you have. It's also what a lot of pro athletes, as you're learning now, the ex-pro athletes say they miss the competition in the big matches. But what we don't see as fans on the outside is the 6-7 days of preparation that goes into that. That's not really as missed. But you were in the top 1% of people in your field. So you got to the pro game, you got to a pretty high ranking, and you were able to make a lot of memories along the way. And as you said, it never really felt like a job. I mean, where else are you going to, if that story's correct, right? Like, where else are you going to get a ride from an airport mechanic to catch a flight?
That's true. That was, 2010 Binghamton. Those are the stories that really make it fun. Obviously, I love playing on the biggest stages. Some of my most memorable matches, playing center court Wimbledon, playing big matches at the US Open, getting the crowd behind you. But you do have to love the process that nobody sees as well to be able to enjoy those moments. And I miss the training blocks in the Florida heat, getting on court and putting 2-3 hours in and feeling miserable at the end, but you've accomplished something, and that you've put yourself in position that when you get to New York and you're in a fifth set in that summer heat, you can handle it. So there's a lot of nuance behind the curtain that's makes for really fun stories like that. Binghamton, getting a ride from the airport mechanic. It's just, these are also the stories everyone loves to hear about, the big matches, but there's so many funny interactions, great interactions. You meet so many people behind the scenes that some way, shape, or form shape how you view the world. And also I remember my very first year on, I guess, end of my first full year on tour in Romania, getting a ride back from the tournament supervisor who lived in Bucharest, and just I had to wait around until the finals ended and hitched a ride with him 4.5 hours. We're like going to stopping by his cousin's house to get like a police scanner. So there's all these funny interactions that that stories are just waiting to be told, that when I think back on my career, I'll remember those interactions, the interactions in the locker room with the players, just as much as the matches themselves.
Yeah, it's a special thing to have that, retroactive look at, look, these were the moments that really made me along the way, enjoying the journey as you did. A lot of times athletes retire, maybe not as much recently, but it's got to a point where structure is one of the things that they say that they miss, and that they don't really know how to go through the day-to-day plan without being told, this is what I'm accomplishing, these are the objectives. I will say yourself and maybe athletes of this generation, Bradley, have done a good job of planning out their future after sports. You kind of knew that you were rounding third base, for lack of a better metaphor, that the pro career was winding down. You got into broadcasting, the financial game, some other companies. But kind of walking through that process, Bradley, did you know that with retirement looming, that it was good to kind of plan out and track out your future, so to speak, for the day that you weren't playing anymore?
Definitely. You hit the nail on the head with structure, and that's what athletes I believe, and what I struggled with the most as well, even in the time really, but when I retired, you wake up and it's nice for a week or two, but then you wake up and you're like, oh, what do I have to look forward to?
Yeah.
And I always look forward to getting on the practice court. Some days more so than others. And there's certainly days where it's a little bit more of a chore, but then you get outside and you realize that I'm hitting tennis balls for a living and working on this, and it's not so bad. But I am always someone who's needed that next challenge and needs some of the structure. And I feel very fortunate that I was planning for that before I officially retired. It was crucial for me just to have that peace of mind. And I also think that it helped me free up a little bit towards the end and enjoy the last couple tournaments, something that I don't think I had a great handle on throughout probably the middle end of my career. I was really stressed about what was next and would let it seep into some of the matches. But I think once I really dialed in on what I was doing, I really enjoyed those last events. Atlanta, DC, I feel fortunate that I can look back on the last 2-3 months of my career. Like I maximized. I got to play in fun cities. I reconnected with friends. We got out and explored. It wasn't all about the tennis, and it made it more enjoyable. And then using that, transitioning directly into having some of that experience in broadcasting already while I was playing, and being a current player, allowing me to provide a different insight, and then being able to immediately jump into the broadcasting, I think really helped me contextualize my career and also be able to tell the stories of the current players, not just their game and different matchups, but behind the curtain, like give fans a look behind the curtain, and then on the other side also find a great family and Monograph Wealth Advisors, where I am now currently working as a wealth strategy associate, being able to start with them in October and really have that next purpose. I feel fortunate that I went from having the pro tennis family, and then I jump in and I have 2 families in Tennis Channel and Monograph. So for me, it's a busy time, but there's a lot of learning. It's been really fun to challenge myself in a new way in the wealth advising world, learn new subject matter, understand how the pieces of the puzzle fit together, and also be able to apply lessons from both the tennis world and the wealth advising world, and understand different metaphors and how they might seem separate, but there's a lot of ways to look at it similarly.
Someone that thrives in your case when they're busier, it's probably better to have so much going on. And, like they say, there's only so much golf you can play, right? I know you're the length a lot, but you can't play all the time. It was a heck of a career. So again, hats off to you. And, looking at it, starting in 2012 and finishing up last year, over a decade, as we kind of, transition here on this show to the current stuff going on, how would you say, or what would you say changed the most about the pro game from the time you entered it to the time you left?
I think athleticism and just ball striking are continuing to elevate. When I started on tour, I felt like the pace wasn't as consistently high. You certainly had big servers. You had guys that had serious firepower off both sides, but there was a little bit more room for, I would say, controlling the point, moving the ball around with a little bit more finesse and feel. I was a guy who used my slice a lot off the backhand side. I relied on that change of pace, big forehand, slice backhand, throw guys off, come over it occasionally, but just give players 2 different looks. I don't think you see that nowadays. I think the game is so physical. You don't see guys with any holes necessarily. I feel like maybe more well-rounded, but I would say there's still room for some of that creativity. I think Daniil Medvedev is a great example of someone who might play a little bit more unorthodox in the traditional sense, but he is a master chess player on the tennis court, and the way he thinks through problems. One thing that was amazing to me to stand up that stood out watching him in Australia was his ability to adapt and move forward when he realized the legs weren't there. He started taking returns early. He played more aggressive. Just that adaptability was amazing for me to see. Look at a guy like Jannik Sinner, who is at such a young age, was able to make a complete change to his service motion in the middle of the year and has seen it pay dividends and also be able to stick with it. It's hard to make that change in a 2-week span when you've been serving your whole, one way, and then go out and do it in a match. And it's one thing to do it in practice 50 times. It's another thing to do it at 4-all, 30-all in the third set.
Yeah.
So, I think you're seeing, I guess to sum it up, I just think there's so much more pace consistently. You're seeing bigger, like more size. I don't have the numbers. This is purely my own feel. I didn't feel like I was that small when I stepped foot on. I'm 6 feet. There were plenty of guys taller than me, but usually it was, okay, tall guy, 6'4", 6'5", going to be a big serve, but maybe you need to try and expose the movement.
Yeah, they're moving great.
Are you going to expose Zverev's movement? Like he moves, these guys are moving exceptionally well. Right. And they have the size and reach. So definitely there. I love watching guys like Grigor Dimitrov still use the slice effectively and throw guys off, break the rhythm as someone who used that strategy. So it's fun to see different game styles continue to emerge and see some of these quote unquote veterans find success. Another, I can keep rattling off names, but another guy for me is Adrian Manarino, who broke into the top 20 for the first time. He's 35, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's 35, 36. Yeah, best career year of his career last year.
Career year. And another guy that is very tricky to play because every ball is down below your knees. And it's hard to play that style of tennis that looks very good on TV. Both guys wailing from corner to corner on the ball, moving incredibly. There's a little bit more of a chess match with them. Yeah,
that Ben Shelton found that out the hard way. And it wasn't about how hard you hit it and how hard you can serve. There's a chess match there. More here with Bradley Klahn on Tennis Channel Inside In. A lot of good points of how the game's changed. Smaller tournaments in the month of February, but we're moving on here in the season, and there's still a lot to play for, a lot of dividends that can be paid. One of the guys I think you've mixed up with at least once or twice on court won a title last week in Bublik. He wins Montpellier. And it was really, a shocking thing, not just that he goes the distance and wins the title, but he lost the first set in every one of his matches, Bradley. And this is a guy that, has been known at times to maybe check out or dip out a little bit when it hasn't gone well. But he showed you why exactly the skill's always been there. And it was kind of, I don't want to say jarring, but it was cool to see him dig in time and time again and not, exit stage left. And again, full marks to him. He beat some quality opponents to win that title.
Yeah, another guy who's at his career high. I've played him a couple times over the course of my career. And you're right. That was always the MO was, try and hold on and can you steal the first set? Can you allow him to beat himself? He's always a guy that's had the big serve. He's been very talented, moves well for another guy, big guy who moves well for his size. But it was always that, can he actually put it together? Will he dig in and fight? And look, everyone matures that he's still, or like mid-20s.
Yeah.
Everyone comes along at their own pace. And I know he's talked about in the past of it, not necessarily enjoying the tennis as much. And I think talking more like for the money, but he's a damn good tennis player. And when it clicks and when he digs in, he is a hard out. It's a guy that, we talked earlier, everyone hitting off both sides cleanly,
Mhm.
pace is similar, see a similar ball. He's a guy that will mix it up, throw in some different looks, and he can take you out of your own game. I know when I played him, it's been very uncomfortable because you don't feel settled. You never know if he's going to go for a huge second serve down break point. You want to try and step in, take it early, but maybe he's going to go 120 into the body, or maybe just going to roll it in. Do you stay
Right.
back? So he gets you thinking in ways that is challenging and presents problems to opponents. And I think he's a very fun guy to watch. I always appreciate nuances to the game and throwing in variety.
Yeah, there was a lot of strategy in that match, specifically against Shorich. He did some things tactically that worked well. But again, I mean, his game is so dynamic. Love to see him digging in. I do want to mention quickly on the women's side, we had a pair of champions. Ostapenko playing her best tennis of the last 6 or 7 years easily, wins another title in Linz, her second of the year already. And then Diana Schneider, another college tennis alum, gets that title as well. So the women's side is holding firm with Ostapenko, but you have to give love to the college tennis team, which is producing more and more pros than even when you came onto the tour. It seems like, the game's been littered with all these great players, these college players that aren't just on tour, but they're factors in the championship weekends.
It's awesome to see. I know when I stepped foot into college, you had guys like John Isner, Kevin Anderson, Somdev Debarman coming out of college, making their name in the pro ranks. Then my class, Steve Johnson, Austin Krajicek, been #1 in the world in doubles. Start to see more guys have success. But yeah, when I came on tour, there was a little bit of, I don't know if it was an inferiority complex or just you weren't sure. Like there was college tennis was talked down upon a little bit more negatively.
A little side-eyed, maybe.
It was a little bit like, okay, he went back to school. How serious is he? Whereas now you've seen Cam Norrie break into the top 10. Obviously, Ben Shelton is a phenomenal example of, immediate skyrocket to stardom. But Chris Eubanks, a great example, going 3 years to Georgia Tech, taking time on tour to figure it out, and then really excelling, breaking into the top 100 in Miami last year. And then we've seen his meteoric rise up into the top 35. So what I think, and then you mentioned on the women's side, you also had Jenny Brady make the final, Danielle Collins, Jenny Brady making the final of Australian Open a couple years ago. Danielle Collins mentioned Schneider winning her first title after 1 year at NC State. So I think once you see more people do it, you all of a sudden get this glimmer of hope in your eye. Oh, it's a viable pathway. I also, let's not take away from the partnership that the ATP and the college ranks have. And I believe the WTA or the ITF has also implemented a system to promote opportunities for some of these players who are highly ranked in college to get a head start in their pro careers and receive wild cards in the challenger level events. So I just think it's an overall promotion of the college game translating to the pros, and that exudes confidence that it's possible.
It's been phenomenal to see. I agree completely with that. And I have to also mention too, another thing phenomenal to see, and I know you would appreciate this, Bradley, is Ariana Rodnova getting the top 100 at age 34. For someone that's been just battling and putting the work in, to have this breakthrough at this stage in the game is very cool to see.
It's awesome. It's a testament to perseverance, never giving up on the dream. And also just a reminder that not everyone's path is the same. Everyone loves to see the stars, the Carlos Alcaraz, Iga Swiatek's breaking through early, as teenagers, early 20s. But this sport is made up of all different stories. And for some, you get there just by continuing to put the work in and being willing to stay out there longer than others, and eventually trusting that you'll get that opportunity.
Before we wrap this up, Bradley, this has been a blast. Bradley Klahn here on Tennis Channel Inside In. looking ahead to this week and beyond and what we have on the tennis calendar, I want to get your thoughts on one of the premier players of the game who's kind of shuffling the pieces, to say the least. Holger Rune is, not going to be working with Boris Becker. Wunthi is also out of there too. We don't know the specifics of what exactly happened, but I come to you with this. I'm a Holger Rune fan. I think he's great for the game. I think the potential is still there, but I'm also a fan of continuity, and he hasn't seemed to find that in the last couple months, couple years even. What do you think could propel him to find that and really just build a relationship? Because I think, he's going to be judged with his talent to some of the game's greats for a long time. So how can he find that continuity and find that team?
Yeah, you make a great point because I would say, has proven more so than the others that the results at the high end can be there. Beats Novak Djokovic, wins his first Masters event in Paris in 2022, I believe. But he's also prone to these streaks even before that run in 2022. I know he went through a pretty substantial losing streak before finding it on the indoor courts. I think without that continuity and that voice, that just the consistent presence, somebody to, I guess, hold the reins back a little bit. You always have to be careful. He's a fiery, passionate guy. He makes no qualms about it. And I think that is great about him. It's awesome for the sport. He has the firepower from the back of the court to challenge all these greats. It's a matter of harnessing that in a more consistent way. And that's where maybe some consistency from a coach who understands his personality. I'm a big believer in you really need the personal relationship between the coach and player to be there. You spend more time with your coach than your significant other. Yeah. So if you don't get along with them first and foremost, you're not going to trust the message coming from the coach. And that can lead to inconsistencies. That can also lead to high turnover. So finding a coach that really buys in, and that Holger buys in too, is key. I still think he's so young, and the fact that he is already cracking, he's established himself in the top 10. He's been knocking on the door of top 5. I don't remember what his career high was, but he's already proven that he can beat these top players. Now it's just a matter of being able to do this week in, week out.
He's gotten as high as number 4, so he's been there.
Okay, so he's been there. So now, the next stage for him is, can you solidify yourself in that top 4? Yeah. And to do that, you look at the top 4 now: Alcaraz, Djokovic, Medvedev, Sinner. How are you going to break through? There's a pretty substantial
major
gap between Sinner and Rublev at 5 currently. So that comes with consistency. Sinner, what's enabled him to make this rise? He, besides throwing up in a bucket in Beijing, he's beaten Novak 3 of 4 times. He's won his last 4 against Medvedev. These guys are consistently there each week. So that's, to me, that's where Holger's upside is being able to not just have the flash in the pan and be streaky, but be able to put it together for a calendar year.
And Sinner proving that you could flip the narrative too, right? Not only working on his game, but was 0-6, I believe, against Medvedev, and flip that around completely. So you can change and develop. Well, before we go here, I know you're on T2 calling matches, a lot of Abu Dhabi for the ladies. So what stood out in that tournament? I think we saw Emma Raducanu with a big win early. Then Ons Jabeur beats her today. We saw, I think, the longest match of the year, a 343 head-to-head mile in that match that somehow had a 6-1 set in the third set. Still went that long.
Crazy.
But what else has stood out for you, or what stood out, Bradley, from Abu Dhabi on the women's side?
Yeah, Sorana Cirstea not winning a match to start 2024, and then digging out a tough 3-setter against Caroline Garcia, and then obliterating Maria Sakkari today. She's looking good, starting to put some confidence together. I think Ludmila Samsonova Steranko's had a tough go of it. The last 2 matches coming up with 1 game. She got double bageled by Sabalenka in Australia, but Samsonova was firing on all cylinders. Another person who that was her first win of the year. Curious to see Rybakina.
Yeah.
How she's got a tough first round against Danielle Collins. So be anxious to see that one tomorrow. But a lot of good tennis. Haddad Maya, you mentioned that match. How she gets a day off. So how does she recover? Ons Jabeur was very efficient against Raducanu today.
Yeah, Ons actually, winning that match and, looking fit, which was the big part of, we know the emotional baggage, but also she was banged up last year. So looking fit, and there's comfort for her playing in her home region of the world. So we like to see Ons, another variety player, as you mentioned, that mixes it up and plays a different way. And I also want to just conclude on for the men. We talk about February being maybe a slower part of the tennis year. There's still a lot to prove. There's still a lot to play for and a lot to prove. 3 of the top American men all bunched in the rankings: Paul, Shelton, and Tiafoe, and even Eubanks thrown in there too. All in Dallas, all with an opportunity to maybe, separate themselves from the pack. And, there is some territorial there. I know they're all friends and friendly, but there's a real chance to kind of separate yourself here if you're one of those guys.
Yeah. It's one of the few months of the year on the ATP calendar, at least, where there's not a 1,000 or a Grand Slam. You mentioned 3 250s this week. You've got indoor hard in Dallas, indoor in Marseille, clay courts in Cordoba for those that are inclined to the slick stuff. Not my cup of tea, but it provides a lot of opportunities. I watched Federico Coria make the finals last year in Cordoba. He's been hovering on the top 100 out in the live rankings, has to essentially final to keep himself there. Digs through yesterday against Altmaier, who's no slouch on the clay, beat Sinner last year in Roland Garros. You look at Dallas, you mentioned those 3 Americans all bunched together. Tough. France Tiafoe plays a young up-and-comer. Alex Mickelson, another top American. So there's a lot of opportunities for these guys to increase their match count, right? Tiafoe, second round, Australian Open, lost to Mahatch, who has actually looked pretty good in Marseille in the quarters. He beat Murray and Musetti back-to-back days. Shelton, third round of Australia, you mentioned earlier, losing to Manarino. Tommy also had a tough one, had match points against Kecmanovic in Australia. So all these guys have this opportunity to get some matches under their belt, build towards Acapulco 500. Tommy made the final last year there, and then look into Indian Wells, Miami. So a lot to play for. It's early in the season. One of the keys for the start of the year is just getting as much match play under your belt, and away they go.
Yeah, we look at all these breakthroughs, Bradley, where we say, wow, what a great run at Indian Wells or Miami or Roland Garros even, but take it back even further. A lot of them start at these small events. It started with a run to a title or a big win here and a big result there. So it'll be interesting to see how it progresses. Bradley Klahn, always a pleasure. Congrats again on finishing up a great career and, working your way into the next phase of your life. You're always welcome on this show. Can't wait to do it again. Thanks for coming on Tennis Channel Inside In.
Thanks for having me on, Mitch. Really appreciate it.